Some people ask me why I don't make any videos about Swiss politics, even though I lived in Switzerland for most of my life and still live there. Well, there are several reasons, but the main reason is that I am not a Swiss citizen and thus can never go into Swiss politics. Nonetheless, I think that Swiss politics are interesting, and that's why I'm making today's video concerning the new initiative that wants to cap the Swiss population at 10 million. There isn't much to say about the initiative itself, as the name is quite self-explanatory. The federal and cantonal governments should prevent the Swiss population reaching 10 million before the year 2050. The more strict measures should appear after the population has crossed 9.5 million. That's it. If you want to know the details, check out the link in the description, which is a video from the Swiss government about the initiative. Now I will present you the arguments for and against this initiative, and afterwards I'll tell you my opinion. Let's start with the arguments from the opposition. They are calling this the Chaos Initiative for many reasons. The initiative would worsen the relationship between Switzerland and the EU. This is because the majority of immigrants are from the EU. If Switzerland had to take measures to lower population growth, it would endanger many bilateral agreements between Switzerland and the EU. This wouldn't be only bad for the people who couldn't travel so easily anymore, but also for the economy, as the EU is the biggest trade partner of Switzerland. According to the opposition, the initiative would do the most damage inside of Switzerland. The skilled worker shortage would become worse, as well as the problem regarding pensions. There wouldn't be enough people to work for the pensions of the aging Swiss population. Other arguments are that the initiative could lead to an increase in crime, as the Swiss police couldn't work so well with the European police anymore, and that the initiative would make crossing borders more difficult. This affects mainly people like me who live near the border and sometimes go shopping in Germany, or people who live abroad but work in Switzerland. Now let's talk about the many arguments for this initiative. Because of this and their complexity, I will only go into one argument in detail, and this is the lack of space in Switzerland and its consequences. Switzerland has about the same area as the Netherlands, but the Netherlands have twice as much inhabitants, and apparently they don't see their population growth as such an issue that they want to cap it. But unlike the Netherlands, Switzerland is 70% mountains, 60% of its area are the Alps, and 10% are the Jura Mountains. Only 10% of the population lives in the Alps and 20% live in the Jura Mountains. This means that the majority is squeezed into the Mittelland, or the plains. Fun fact, around 5 million people live within 5 kilometers of the A1 highway. This may not sound like an issue until you consider self-sufficiency. Every human being needs food and water. Switzerland has enough water, but the food has to come from somewhere. And since you don't want to be too dependent on other countries, it is important to make enough food yourselves. For this you need suitable areas, and this is where the problem arises. This area is limited and most of it is in the Mittelland. This means that the more people live in Switzerland, the more area you need. But these people also need an additional area to live. So Switzerland is not only getting more dependent on other countries, but it also destroys its natural and biodiverse areas. This was on the topic of agriculture, food and environment. But another issue is living space. Now you don't only have the consequences mentioned before, but also economic consequences. House prices and rent will go up. It is economics 101, supply and demand. The more people there are, the more demand exists. And if you have more demand, the prices increase. But that is not the only issue. These people work and they have to get to work somehow. This impacts traffic with more jams because there are more cars, but it also impacts public transportation. The buses and trains have become very full in the last years. It occurred to me several times that people have to squeeze themselves into the bus, like in Japan, because there isn't enough space. I think you can see where I'm going with this. More people need more, and Switzerland can't provide all of it and is thus dependent on other countries. I won't go into the topics of pensions, skilled labor shortage, and crime, since they are also big issues, but they are general immigration topics, which I already covered or will cover on this channel. One thing which I would also like to talk about is the Swiss immigration problem. Ethnic Swiss people are a minority in their own country. You would probably tell me that I'm wrong and that only 28% of the Swiss population are foreigners, but many of you forget naturalizations and their children. In the year 1950, Switzerland had around 4.5 million inhabitants. There, it was almost 100% Swiss. And unlike many other countries, Switzerland didn't experience a baby boom. The average fertility rate was 2.2, with its peak of 2.6 in the 60s. But there, the numbers were likely influenced by the post-war immigration wave of hundreds of thousands of Italian and Spanish immigrants. And it is most of the time the case that first-generation immigrants have more children than the natives. So I'm assuming that the Swiss population grew a tiny bit from 1950 until the year 1970, when the fertility rate went below 2.1. So let's assume the native Swiss population grew from 4.5 million to 5 million in the year 1970, which is an accurate assumption if we look at the total population in Switzerland and immigration numbers at the time. So I'm going to assume that at its peak there were 5 million ethnic Swiss people. But since the 70s, the fertility rate was always around 1.5, which means that for over 50 years, less and less Swiss people are born. If we calculate that, we'll see that the ethnic Swiss population went down to 3.9 million. But careful here, I didn't even include factors like higher fertility rates of immigrants and the number of mixed Swiss children, which I wouldn't count as Swiss in most cases. Which means that we're realistically at 3 to 3.5 million ethnic Swiss people in Switzerland, which is a third of the population. The second third are naturalized citizens, their children, or mixed people, and the last third are foreigners. And I don't need to explain to you that this is a trend, which means that this will continue if the real Swiss people don't intervene. And by the way, the only reason why Switzerland is still working so well with all this immigration is because most of it is European immigration, mainly from Germany and Italy. So in this sense, Switzerland is similar to the United States. But just like in the US, European immigration is going down, while non-European immigration is rising. And you can already feel these consequences in certain parts of Switzerland. And the number of these parts is increasing, and they're getting worse and worse. So the conclusion of this video isn't that Switzerland is lost. I'm not blackpilling anybody. But it will be a very long process until Switzerland is on the right track again. And the yes to the 10 million Switzerland initiative is the first step. In some way the situation is sad because you could have avoided this with the Schwarzenbach initiative. For those who don't know, the Schwarzenbach initiative was an initiative aiming to reduce the amount of foreigners in every canton to 10%. It sadly didn't pass with only 46% voting for it. So in this way it is probably too late for a 99% ethnic Switzerland. But a lot is still possible, and I will discuss solutions in my future videos. So don't give up, dear Swiss people. I'm Slovak Reuper, and I'll see you next week.